and broadcasting. We are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Newburyport Historical Commission meeting, July 9th, 2020. Coincidentally, my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
I hesitated about mentioning, but anyway. So we have the commissioners on. You just heard from Patricia Pecknick, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just do a quick roll call here that we're all here. Mr. Joe Morgan. I think you guys are probably locally muted, so remember to unmute yourselves so we can hear you. While we're waiting for Joe. Peter, I see you're not muted. You're there, right?
And I'm here.
And it's Joe, thank you. And Peter?
Here.
And Mr. Ron Ziemba?
Yes.
Okay, that's Ron. And Mr. Christopher Fay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, also on the call are the note taker Gretchen Joy, Caitlin Sullivan of the Planning Department, and Andy Port, who is also doing us the favor he's done for many of these meetings. He must be getting rather tired of it, but he is sharing the screen and will be displaying the various visuals as we go along. We have a couple of three basic items on tonight's agenda. The first two are roofline change, demo permits items where we have to determine if the particular property is historically significant and preferably preserved or not. And if it is preferably preserved, there is something called a demo plan review, which is a public hearing to determine if the plans are acceptable as is or require any changes, etc. So there's a good chance we will have one or more of those public meetings. Those are the only times at which members of the public will be permitted to speak. Since this is a Zoom meeting, if you've been on this before, you know the drill perhaps. There is a function of the conference, the Zoom conference, where you can raise your hand. You will need to do that, and Andy or myself will try to recognize you, unmute you, so you can speak. You will also need to unmute yourself, either on your computer or a telephone or whatever it is you're speaking on, because they both have to be unmuted, I believe, in order for you to be heard. Okay, the first item on tonight's agenda is, and lastly, when you do get on are identified to speak, please identify yourself as is usual in any public meeting. The first item on the agenda is 286 High Street. I believe Scott Brown, the architect, and Matt Langus, I'm not sure what his role is, but anyway, they're here to speak to that. So are they present?
Well, good evening. It's Scott Brown, the architect for the project. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you well, Scott. Thank you.
Excellent. Andy, could we go to sheet A 1.1?
There we go. Sorry for the delay.
Should be the one where we're seeing, you know, the neighborhood context photos.
Yeah, it looks like I'm seeing A 1.0, Andy. Did you want 1.1, Scott?
Right, yeah, the next
1.1.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, yep.
There we go. Great. So again, Scott Brown, the architect for the project. You know, in 2010, I had the good fortune of being the architect for this building before you tonight, as well as the two new residences next door at 288 High Street and 290 High Street. I think at the time, this entire project at all three parcels was controversial in small circles, and I think it might even resulted in some zoning changes. But despite all that, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, 10 years later, these structures have melded quite nicely into the fabric of High Street and have become an essential part of this streetscape. So I think most of you have been in Newburyport for a very long time, but for those of you that have not, this used to be, you know, 286 High Street, the building before you tonight, used to be the old Christian Science Church. And can we go to sheet A10?
And Andy, before you do that, I just want to point out for the people who don't know, in the upper right-hand quadrant there, the building to the right, the white building with the 2 columns, that is the subject property, is it not, Scott?
That's correct,
The
yeah.
former church.
Next
So the
sheet,
two-
the next sheet is the existing photos of the house.
Okay, and the 2 new properties you were talking about were to the left and right of it, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
So yeah, here are the existing photographs of the house, and this used to be the old Christian Science Church. You know, it was built in the 40s, and the district data sheet, and in the district data sheets, this is, I found it very interesting that this is not listed as a contributing structure, but rather as an intrusion. You know, and I found that somewhat amusing. I don't think I hadn't run across this before, but I guess when they did the district data sheets, I guess everything, I could be wrong about this, but everything post 1930 was listed as an intrusion. This is a very high quality building, and back in 2010, I really enjoyed drawing this when I had a lot of time. Anyways, and you know, Morris's bought it in 2010, and we were tasked with converting this to a residence, and it was an immensely challenging project. Andy, could you go to sheet A2.1? So as a church, you know, this entire building was essentially sort of a 2-story space, and this is basically the left side elevation or the north elevation. And you can actually see here that, you know, one of the challenges we were faced with was how do we put a second floor in a building that was designed as a 2-story space. And you can see sort of those dotted lines there, which represent, you know, where the second floor is. And, you know, we actually had to get a little creative because we wanted to, in 2010, we wanted to alter the exterior of this building as little as possible. So like one of the things we had to do is we had to install, you know, fixed shutters, those fan-like, you know, those fan-like shutters in the semicircle. Those are fixed and really meant to conceal sort of second floor space behind the wall. You actually see the dotted lines running through the window. In those sections, we had to get creative and sort of like thin up the floor structure, you know, and carve away at it in order to sort of like keep the existing windows as they were. So in this elevation, this is where we chose to put in all 3 of the second floor bedrooms. So, you know, we were tasked, you know, we were challenged with how do we get, you know, how do we put windows in that bring light into these rooms and that also meet sort of like, you know, the egress requirements per the building code. So we looked at a number of different options. We studied a number of different window types. We even had some options where we had some doghouse dormers that actually, with bigger double hung windows that actually pierced the roof line. But in the end, we decided that sort of the best thing for the building was to sort of take the least line of resistance, go with the smallest window that met egress, and also put it up as high as we could, and yet at the same time impacting the existing trim as little as possible. Andy, could we go to sheet A1.3?
A question, Scott, when you said it's
Yep.
that second floor you just referenced, that dotted line. So when the church was still a church, was there a second floor there, or was it all
No,
just one?
it was entirely at, the front of the building was a 2-story space. The back of the building,
There was no second floor.
yeah, there was basically there was no second floor.
Okay, thanks.
So anyways, so the result of, you know, choosing to sort of go with the least line of resistance and the thing that impacted, you know, the exterior of the building as little as possible was going to, the big compromise was that we had very small windows on the north face. So I think all of us sort of like understood that these bedrooms were going to be dark, you know. So here we are 10 years later, you know, and the Morrises approached me in March, and, you know, they have always wondered like whether or not we sort of did the right thing, because these bedrooms are dark. As you can see from the photo in the upper left-hand corner, we have very low windows, and over the 10 years, you can see from the photograph and the bottom photographs, you know, the landscaping along that side, which provides, you know, a nice buffer from the abutter has really, really matured. So, it's gotten darker. So the Morrises approached me in March and wondered if there was sort of a better solution. And, Brian Morris sent me some photographs of some very bad dormers. And, and initially I was, really resistant to the idea, because this has been, was one of my favorite projects that I've ever done. And I thought it was, pretty perfect. And as was, but, I don't live there. And, but anyways, we engaged in a design process, and I started to warm up to the idea and realized that this could, putting the dormer that we're proposing before you tonight could really have a big impact on the interior of the house. So the rendering in the upper right-hand corner shows basically what this would look like from the inside. And you can see how it sort of like, opens the space up as well as has the potential to bring in a lot more light, into the space. And the two photographs on the bottom, the one in the lower left-hand corner shows, what it looks like now. And the photograph in the lower right-hand corner shows what the proposed dormer would look like. We studied a few other, can we go to sheet? I think it's A 1.5. So we also looked at, these are some renderings done in basically not the master bedroom, but another bedroom in the house, and where we were considering doing a dormer as well. And so what you're seeing here is this is sort of the by right option. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to design a dormer that actually met the requirements of the zoning bylaw, meaning that the face of it is set back 18 inches from the exterior wall. So this meets those requirements, but you can see, what the significant impact it has on the interior space. And at the end of the day, we've decided not to do this in this room because the room is so quirky, but you can see that setting the face of the dormer back 18 inches has sort of a very negative impact on the space. And not only that, it is significantly complicated from a structural standpoint. Can we go to sheet A 1.4? So again, this is another view of what, this is a photo taken in March, basically when there were no leaves on the trees, and kind of the before and what it would look like after. I would argue that setting this dormer back 18 inches really has no impact on the quality of this. It does not improve it. In fact, it's sort of a detriment from the interior of the space. And I would also argue that this is really the only view where we see the dormer. It has very little impact on the architecture of this structure from a public way. And again, if we go to the previous sheet, again, this is what it would look like today, a 1.3. Here, so, it is set back significantly from the front of the building. We are fortunate to have very deep eave lines here. And setting it back from the exterior face below, I really think it has no impact on the quality of this. And so with that, I think I'll be happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So just so everyone understands what our procedure tonight is we have the first question the board has to decide is the structure historically significant? I agree with you that it is kind of almost amusing in a way that it was regarded as intrusive, but in 1980, I can sort of understand their thinking, perhaps. They probably thought of High Street as a lovely venue of federal and Victorian and so forth houses. But I think at least I personally would agree with that. I don't think it's intrusive at this point. So the first thing we have to decide is the building historically significant? And if so, is it preferably preserved or not? So, and once that decision is made, we'll know whether we need to get into a discussion of whether we, think that the plan is good or not. So let me turn to my fellow commissioners, and let's see. We should probably do the raising of hands to keep things orderly if possible. But does anyone have a question, comment, or anything they'd like to add or say? Oh, come now. I may have to resort to it, Bonnie Sontag. Oh, I see a hand. My vice chair, Patricia Pecknick. Would you like to comment, Patricia?
Yes, I just want to say this is one of the reasons that we really need to update the district data sheets, because in 1980, this is listed on the macro sheet as 1943. Of course, it didn't seem to be historically significant, but if we were to update the sheet, I'm sure we'd find a lot of situations in which we now would like something to be protected by the Secretary standards and all the protections of being in the DCOD. But if no one else is going to say anything, I'll certainly make a motion that it's historically significant and preferably preserved.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. I think Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, by procedure, we can have a motion and even second it, and that motion can be discussed. That's correct, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and second that motion. Any discussion of that? Any of the commissioners either want to comment for or against or anything at all? You're awfully quiet tonight. Joe, yes. Did you have a comment, Joe?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to think that it's historically significant, but I don't. If it's 1940 vintage, it's called as a colonial structure. I don't see what the significance is. It's barely reached its age prerequisite to be considered historical. I don't, unless there are specific qualities about the building or specific features of the building that make it historical. I would just like to know a little bit more why we would even think of it as being a historical building. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a legitimate question, Joe. And I was thinking about that before you even posed that question. In very much the context you did pose it. I would, if this was some, contractor built, duplex or, regular house, of that era, that would probably make a lot more sense. I'm kind of here's my thinking, that given its position on High Street as a church for many years, well, since its building in 1940, trying to think, Scott, what year did you say it was sold?
2010.
2010. So that's what, 70 years as a Christian Science church in Newburyport. And, in that same spot, it's kind of, I think of it as somewhat one of the various, icons of High Street, actually, at this point. Now, you're quite right that it's, let's see, it's now, 40, so that's 60, it's 80 years old, so technically it qualifies, it's over 75 years old, right? But was it 1940 or what was the exact year it was built? 43, someone said?
Yeah, I think so. Yep, 1943.
Okay, let me correct that. I had 40 in my notes. All right, well, still qualifies, I think, right? So 43, so it's, so anyway, so Joe, does that make sense to you? I think it's a combination of not just strictly the age, but really in this case, more about the individual history of that particular structure, its function as part of the community, and that sort of thing. And it's rather, unique design, since it was not originally designed or built as a residence. In fact, Scott, I have to, I was rather amazed that the exterior changed so little when it became a residence. So if you're able to somehow make it a residence inside, then you've certainly achieved something there.
I just wanted to say, I think that's fine. I think if that's the way we would like to think about the structure in its historical context and its previous function.
Yeah.
But I think we ought to remind everyone that it no longer serves that previous function.
Right.
And in its current incarnation, and given the fact that it's already been altered in many ways to accommodate a new function, we need to really think about this small addition of a dormer in that context, and really, is this additional dormer structure, is it significant in the context of a building that's already been significantly altered in the past few years?
Okay, and I do see your hand up, Patricia, but one quick question for Joe first. Joe, so do I understand you correctly that what you're saying is that as we think about possible alterations to the structure, or in this case, the specific dormer, it should be thought of in the context of a residence, which is its current function, rather than its prior function as a church?
Correct. So I think that's going to lower the bar significantly relative to however we want to consider whatever the arguments for and against this dormer would be. That's all I wanted to mention.
Okay. Now, Patricia, I know your hand is up. Did you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I want to talk about historical significance. This is 1943, a time when there's not a lot of money going into construction in the United States because of World War II. And so a lot of the buildings that you get are this sort of classical revival building, reminding the country of the importance of democratic principles. And I think for that reason, it's part of a rare building in the Newburyport landscape that was constructed during those years. Right after that, you got the post-war, ranch style houses and sort of suburbanization. I also want to point out that when we say it's preferably preserved, we're merely moving on to a review of the dormer. If we think it's not preferably preserved, then we'll be done, and anything that anyone wants to do to the house, they'll be able to do to the house, right? So I think to be able to have a discussion about the dormer, it's important to recognize that it's preferably preserved. Otherwise, we're kind of done.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe, that's since you're relatively new, I'll check in. Do you understand Patricia's point about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, I know there's a second part to this this introduction. Yes, definitely.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So if we decide it's either not historically significant or not perfectly preserved, either of those, then we're done. We say goodnight to Scott and company, and they go off and do their thing. So there's still a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Joe, your hand is still up, but I assume you just haven't put it down yet. If there's no other commentary on that, why don't we go around the horn here and take a vote? I'll just take them in the order they're showing up on my list here. Ron, are you a yes or no on that particular motion? The motion, in case anyone's forgotten, is that it is historically significant and preferably preserved.
I vote yes on that, Glenn.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Then we got Christopher Fay.
I vote yes as well.
Okay, and Peter?
Yes.
Okay, let's see, Joe Morgan?
I'll vote yes.
Okay, Patricia?
Yes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And myself, I will also vote yes. Okay, so that decision has been made. Now, Scott has already pretty much presented the case for doing the dormer the way he's architected it. But as we begin that discussion, I'll give you another chance, Scott, if there was anything you wanted to add at this point to that particular discussion as to, I think you've laid it out pretty well. For those on the board, I know Patricia and I talked about this a little bit with the planning board. There's a recently enacted zoning ordinance that defines dormers that are permitted without any special approval process. And that was the by right option that Scott was describing earlier. You saw resulted, it would have to be pushed back in from the vertical side wall. And you saw what that kind of does to the interior. I think it might even do in this case some odd things to the exterior. In a case of a house or structure with a very large eave, as this one has, the fact that the dormer is flush with the exterior wall isn't even necessarily all that obvious, because you have the eave and it is set back from that. So it's not like, I think the idea behind that rule was to avoid people essentially building up a third floor or a second floor in a smaller structure by making an enormous dormer that was flush with the outside. It was, the roof line, went right up to the peak of the roof, and you basically, they called it a dormer to try to sneak it in, but it was really basically another floor. I think it's pretty, at least it seems obvious to me, we're not dealing with that situation here. So that's how I'm looking at this, and I think you've explained that pretty well. So anyway, I'm babbling on here. Did you want to add anything else, Ron? Obviously, me, Scott.
No, I think I've covered, everything I sort of had to say initially about this, and
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Scott? Let's see, anybody's hand up? Not seeing any hands. Well, would someone like to make a motion to either approve or deny the proposed plan to would involve the demolition of that small section of roof to build the dormer that is shown in the renderings and the plans as submitted?
Glenn, is there
Yes.
any public comment on this? Are there any?
Oh.
Someone has a hand up. That's why I'm asking.
I'm so sorry. Here, you're absolutely right. This is a public hearing and there is a public comment section, and I should have opened that up. So why don't I do that now? I'll officially open the public comment section. So we do have a member of the public who is looking to speak. It looks like it's Stephanie Nikitich. Andy, Stephanie, looks like you are audio enabled, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Stephanie Nikitich, 93 High Street. This might become a very heartfelt comment, but I would like to address the questions about the designation of this building as an intrusion in 1984.
Okay.
In 1984, it was not yet 75 years or more older. And so intrusion is just the language that was used. It was not some designation by the Newburyport Historical Commission or the Massachusetts Historical Commission that this was an undesirable building. So obviously now it is 75 plus years old. That's why it's actually being reviewed for roofline demo. It is an important building. I've lived here for 40 years. And so for most of my time in Newburyport, this was a church. It wasn't a house. It was a church, a beautiful church. So it is an extremely good example and rich example, as a member pointed out, of the colonial revival era, during a time when there wasn't much building going on. So when it was converted to a residence in 2010, most of us who admire this building as iconic, we're very happy that the exterior, whatever alterations went on, were inside. And the exterior really was not badly altered. So the example on the left that you see of a big dormer is a real intrusion. That is a fake Greek revival built in 2010. As Scott Brown said, that development of that corner was controversial then. I still consider it to be controversial. So this is a wonderful building. I would hate to see any dormer on it. And so I understand that there is an allowance for the owners to put a dormer on it. And I guess I'm begging them, and I'm begging you for whatever you can do to simply not allow this. This is already a huge building with a lot of living space. And I just don't see how altering this important building in Newburyport for a little bit more light in a bedroom is worthwhile. So I plead to the owners, I guess, not to do this at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to put your hand down, by the way. Thanks. Are there any other, I see a hand in the public. Yes, it looks like you're enabled, Tom Colajon, but yes, so you can go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello, this is Tom Colajon, 64 Federal Street in Newburyport. I just wanted to comment on this dormer in this particular building. And this is more a personal comment. I am co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust, but on this one, this is more personal. I think this is a wonderful building. When I was much younger, I actually attended this church, and I always thought it had a very substantial positive presence on the streetscape on High Street. It's really dramatic when you consider the columns and the Greek revival aspect of it. It really is a wonderful building, and I agree with the comments that Stephanie made. It is a large building. There's a lot of living space inside it. It really is wonderful, and I just hate to see the roof pitch change with the dormer, no matter how big or small it is. I think it sort of is, I guess you would say, an entryway to future changes, and I'd hate to see that. So that's really it. I just hate to see such a marvelous building changed by a dormer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And your hand is still up, Tom. Okay, now it's down. Anyone else, member of the public, wishes to speak? I'm not seeing any hands. I'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll close the public comment period. And not seeing any hands, so we'll close the public comment period. Turning back to our panel of commissioners and also the applicant, Mr. Brown, Scott, do you have any comment you want to make in light of some of the?
Yeah, I would argue, and I'm very sensitive to this stuff. Meaning, like, I love this building, but I really think that what we're doing here has a very small impact on it. And this view that we're actually seeing now, this is an idealized view of it that you only see for a fraction of a second when you're driving down High Street. And in fact, this is a photo that's taken from across High Street. The building has a presence to it. It sits up high. So actually, when you're walking on the sidewalk, you're not going to see this at all. And even our photos in our previous, the renderings in our previous page, what's it, A1.1 there? These are photos that are actually taken from, let's see here. Yeah, A1.3. I mean, this is on the sidewalk and taken on the sidewalk in front, and you can see that, you can barely see this. And, I personally, if this had like if I felt that this had a significant impact on the architecture of this building, we would be doing something different or basically not at all. Because like I previously said, that this is one of my favorite projects that I've ever done. And the reality is that this dormer only sits sort of a couple feet above the roof line, you know, and we're just grabbing just the slightest amount of space and light for that bedroom.
Right. Scott, do any of your renderings show looking directly from the front of the building, you know, looking at it, that show?
Yeah, you know, we have a lot of materials here, but like A sheet, you know, A 2.2 shows this, and you know, it's basically a two-dimensional drawing of the front elevation of this building.
Well, hang on a second. Right now we're looking at A 1.0. Those are
Right here.
But those,
Yeah.
I think, were actual photographs.
Right.
It's always going to look worse in the drawn elevation because.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why, you know, we did this, you know, that is exactly why we decided to do these other, you know, renderings where we, you know, basically, you know, in Photoshop, we place sort of a model of, you know, the dormer on top of the building, because we felt very strongly that these two-dimensional drawings do not tell the whole truth about what we're doing and what little impact it actually does have on what's there now.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is, as you can see in this view, especially in the winter when the trees are not leaved out, you know, it's fairly visible. Is there a view that like this but directly from the front?
We don't have that, because I don't think you would see it. You know, this is set back. I don't have the dimension off the top of my head, but I mean, it's set back a good 10 to 12 feet from the front elevation of this building. So like here, you wouldn't even, that's right down the middle, you wouldn't see it.
Yeah,
it might have to be across the street, and even across the street, I don't think you would see it. I don't think you'd see it either, because it's set so far back. And again, it's just one moment, which is a fraction of a second going down High Street towards the center of Newburyport, where you would actually see this.
All right, thank you, Scott. So, fellow commissioners, Ron, I see your hand up. You have a comment?
Yes, I do. This is such an interesting conundrum here. But I think I come down on this side. It's no longer a church. And yet that's one of the reasons why we're so fascinated with the building, because it's no longer a church. It's a house now, it's a residence. And it seems to me that what's been recommended here is such a small factor in our enjoyment of this, that it can almost be, well, Scott was just saying this, I think, it can be overlooked. It's easy to overlook. And you're left with the idea that it used to be a church and now it's a residence. And that's sort of unique and dare I say historical, in its own sense.
Yeah.
So I don't, although I am a little bit chastened, I guess, by Mr. Coulter-John's reference to, is this the camel's nose under the tent? And what other, quote, improvements might be made to a place like this if we allow this one? And I don't know, I'm willing to take the chance on this one. It seems to be a very minor effect especially from the street. And it seems like it would significantly improve the inside of this house.
Right.
I recognize that's not part of our purview here, but that's where I'm coming out.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Ron. I can give you a partial answer to the question you posed about the camel's nose effect. If we've already decided it is historically significant and preferably preserved. So in future, if let's say they want to do the same thing on the opposite side, we would be back here having this essentially same discussion, whether it's the same owner or a different owner.
Okay, so it's not really a risk.
I don't think so. Andy, if you've been paying attention, I hope what I said was correct, that if, in future, just because one permit's been granted for something like this, if they want to do another similar roof line change, they would have to come back with a new application for that, et cetera, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, very good. Patricia, I see your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I understand. It makes sense that the applicant wants to do something that has a big sort of positive impact on the interior. Of course, I'm always worried about the impact on the exterior. That's the only thing that we really can think about here. I do appreciate the fact that the Morrises, ever since they bought the old Christian Science building, left the exterior intact. And I know they care about preservation. It's sort of a blessing and a burden to have a house this cool on High Street. But what you do with the roof really matters. And whether it's a house or a church, it's a dormer on a publicly visible elevation on a beautiful house on High Street. So all I can do is, implore them to not install a dormer. I mean, High Street has been largely spared of dormers on this publicly viewable elevations. And when you consider the scale of the house, I think dormers can really ruin the balance. Very little light and air is let in by dormers that serve one bedroom. I know a problematic solution, but for some people less problematic, is skylights. I'm not suggesting that either. I was really happy when I moved into my house that there were skylights on the rear elevation. I thought it'd be great waking up in the morning and seeing the sky, and it's not. I haven't slept past 5 o'clock in the morning in 15 years. I would be really thrilled if the applicant, continued to adapt to the house that way instead of adapting the roof for the sake of adding a little bit of light and air. That's my view. I'm sure that I'd like to hear from other people on the commission.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. And Ron and Patricia, your hands are still up. I don't know if you still want to say anything. Anyone else on the commission like to weigh in on this? Christopher Fay, yes?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. So I'm having a tough time making a decision because I see the dormer and I immediately don't want it. And I sort of feel the same way that Stephanie does. I think that Scott makes a compelling case for the small, I know this is going to help, but how small it is and how maybe unobtrusive. I guess for me, it comes down to the house will know that it's there, if that makes sense. We'll know that it's there. And I'm just having a tough time with that. Like, I don't want to always stand in the way of progress because we're not the Preservation Society. We're the Historic Commission. And so I think we have to have a balance, but that's just sort of my 2 cents. So I don't really have a decision one way or the other at this point. So people can keep talking, maybe convince me.
All right. Joe, I think I saw your hand go up next. Did you want to comment?
Yes, thanks, Chair Richards. Can you clarify again? We made a motion that it is historically significant, correct? But we have not yet made a motion that it is preferably preserved.
Actually, the motion that was approved was that it is historically significant and preferably preserved. So what we're doing now is
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that because I thought that your previous comment was that there would be a second round of a determination. Once it was determined to be historically significant, there would be a separate motion on its
whether or not we
preferably preserved. Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, that's the second phase, Joe.
So I misunderstood that, and I did not mean to actually acknowledge that it was preferably preserved. I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I was not listening close enough.
That's fine. The second phase is what we're in now, which is it's called the demolition plan review. And this is where we decide whether or not to approve the what they're planning to do. So even though it's preferably preserved, we can say yes, it's perfectly preserved, but we don't feel that what they're doing is going to do irreparable harm to the historic value or have a serious adverse effect, whatever, and we can approve it. Or we can decide, no, this is going to ruin the whole thing forever and all time, and we just can't have it.
I see. Well, I'm very sorry that I'm embarrassed.
That's quite all right. Quite all right.
But
The ordinances are confusing.
But while I'm here, then let me just say that I see no problem whatsoever with the addition of the dormer on that roof. I mean, the historical character of the building has already been altered. The fenestration is completely different on that side. If you look at the other side of the building, that side has not been altered. So maybe what you have to do is say that one side of the building is historically significant, but then the other side that's residential it's okay. You can, but I feel that really, as it's already been, as Mr. Brown has already stated, the building is pushed back far enough. The view angle, the side angles are never going to be, are never going to direct your eye directly to the dormer. I think you would just as easily see the leapfrogging of the windows below as you would see the dormer. So
yeah.
I just once the building has been altered in that kind of way, I don't see the historical
Okay.
argument any longer.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. I think I get you loud and clear, Joe. Thanks. And that makes it, that's consistent with what you said earlier about the fact that it's really now a residential structure rather than a church and so on. So there is that change as well. And yes, I did note the change in fenestration on that side, which I would argue is actually quite maybe more obvious than the dormer. And now, Peter, you've had your hand up as well. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to I echo some of what Commissioner Fay was saying. That I'm torn by this, and I was quite confident in what I was thinking about it until Commissioner Morgan started speaking, because my sense was that this building is all about symmetry, and it is very symmetrical. And while, as a practical matter, the dormer may or may not be terribly visible, it does detract from the symmetry. And Chris's comment that the building was no is significant in my mind. But Joe points out that the fenestration has already taken care of the symmetry, and then sort of thrown it off kilter. However, there's something much more intrusive in a dormer than in the difference in the fenestration from one side of the building to the next. And certainly the fenestration is much more visible. And had that not been pointed out, I wouldn't have caught that. So as a practical matter, the dormer makes sense to me. I do appreciate what the Morses have done with maintaining this building, and it's a beautiful building, and I understand the need for light, and I would go for that myself. But I do have trouble with this dormer as it is. It seems to just throw the building out of balance for me.
Okay. Ron, did your hand go back up, or is it just up from before?
Yeah, I think just to maybe reiterate or expand a little bit on my previous comments, if this were still a church,
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that the addition of that dormer would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not a church anymore. It's a residence, and must be seen as a residence. And as I say, one of the reasons we're so fascinated with it is that we know it used to be a church. And I had never been inside this house, but I'd love to see it inside. So I think, you know, this kind of is a hybrid a little bit now.
Mhm.
Yes, church,
Yeah.
and it reminds longtime residents of the church that used to be there, but it's no longer a
Yeah.
church.
Yeah, I understand completely what you're saying, Ron, because I walk past there a lot or ride a bike past there, either one, and I go by and you know, like if you look at the photo the page that we're looking at right now in the upper right hand, you see, you know, the bicycle and the on the walk and the car and the drive of that, you know, so the garage on the right hand side there, and the, you know, the chairs on the porch, so to speak, and so on. So it, you know, we all know it is no longer a church, it's now a residence. So believe it or not, I hadn't noticed the change in the windows on that left or northern side till just, you know, till actually these drawings and so forth. But at any rate, the way it reads to me is a former church very tastefully redone into a residence. There are getting to be more and more of those. You know, there's churches, you know, old firehouses, what have you, being converted. I think this probably, I would consider this probably one of the more successful conversions. But at any rate, that's beside the point, and that's just my opinion on that. At some point, we've got to take a vote on this. So let me see if there's any last comments. Patricia, did your hand go up recently?
I was just going to say quickly, for me, it's the building use is not the thing I'm focusing on, whether it's a church or a residence. It's if it's a publicly visible dormer on High Street and looking at the symmetry of the building. So that's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Peter, your hand is up. Did you want to say something else, or?
Well, I want to second what Patricia just said, which was what my hand was raised to say. I don't think that it's that we're here to discuss the use of the building or the application of the building. We're here to discuss the architecture of the building and its setting. So whether it's a residence or a church is immaterial to me.
Well, while I would say that's true, that the use has implications for the architecture, including, I mean, we have no purview on the interior, so that's out of this discussion. But even on the exterior, as we pointed out, you know, there are some subtle, well, and maybe not so subtle changes like the fenestration that was mentioned on that northern side. So they're obviously, you know, in those, the way that top arch part of the windows had to be changed to accommodate the second floor and so on. So the change in use did necessitate or require certain changes in the overall architecture, including exterior features. So in that sense, it's significant. And does that make sense to you? I hope.
I suppose.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, at this point, we can, it sounds like we could take a motion either way. Either if someone wants to make a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman, for final comments?
Yes, sure. Oh, is that Scott speaking?
Yes. You know, the lack of symmetry or the imbalance that this proposed dormer creates only exists in my two-dimensional drawings. This is something that won't be perceived. In fact, these photos that we have before us on the screen, you won't see a dormer in either one of them. So, you know, again, I think the lack of symmetry, you know, that this dormer creates, it's a non-issue. I mean, there was a time early in my career where, you know, symmetry, you know, meant everything. But at some point, I realized after looking at things that were built that there are some things that you don't see and you don't perceive. And they don't, not everything matters when it comes to symmetry. So again, this thing is set so far back and it is so small, sits off the roof, a very small dimension. You know, it's only a fraction of a second that you perceive this when going down High Street. I might also remind everybody that the only reason that we are here tonight is because this dormer does not meet the requirements for being set back, you know, 18 inches from the exterior of the wall below. I mean, we could by right run a dormer that is 18 inches off of that wall, front to back, as long as it's set back from the front and back face. I think it's 3 feet. But, you know, we could do that, you know, we could do that by right. We would never do that. You know, there's no need for it. And I think certainly something like that would be a significant impact on the building because of the scale of it. But again, you know, we're only here, you know, because this dormer, you know, is in the face of the dormer is in the same plane as the wall below.
Right.
And again, I just feel like I need to remind everybody, this is just, you know, it's not something that, you know, is going to ruin your enjoyment of the front of this thing, because it is so, you know, it's set back far, and it is, you know, for the most part, it is screened by those trees. And it's not even something that you would, I think we do have a photo taken from the woodland side of this. The woodland is the nearest cross street. And you don't even see the side of this building. So again, you know, it's only for a fraction of a second, perhaps when the leaves are off the trees, that you actually perceive this when going down High Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just so the commissioners all, and especially the new ones, all recognize what I think I explained about the by right dormer and all that. So what Mr. Brown is saying is correct, that it triggered the roof line review simply because the dormer came down so that its vertical surface was flush with the vertical surface of the wall below. It is set back significantly. I don't suppose you know how deep that eave is, Scott?
I estimate, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's probably about 20 inches or so to the freeze board, and then it's got another 5. It's got a 5-inch gutter on top of that. So
so if the lower wall was in fact flush with the edge of the roof, you probably would qualify in a sense if set back on the roof where it is to do it by right. But I digress. Anyway, so I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. That, you know, they're trying to do. At least my perception is that the owner and the architect here are trying to make this, accomplish this improvement in the livability in a way that is going to have the least objectionable impact on the outward appearance. Certainly a less unfavorable impact than it would be if they did a by right dormer, even if it wasn't, you know, the full size they'd be allowed to do. So there is, you know, Ron, this gets to something you said earlier. By right, they could do a dormer without, whether we approve of it or not, it would have to be a different design, and I think it would not be as attractive design. And speaking of Ron, I see your hand is up. Did you want to make another comment, Ron, or was your hand?
Yes, I do. At the risk of coming back a third time on this.
No, get right ahead.
It's a matter of, where can I start with this? For me, even though we're not supposed to consider the use of the house, still, for me, the reason we're all fascinated with this house is that it's changed its use. And it still looks like, you know, people look at that and they say, oh yeah, I can see, yeah, it used to be a church. Yeah, right, there's a front entrance and so forth. And to make this very small change in the roof line that's, to me, not even really visible from the front of the house, is no matter at all. Mm-hmm. I think the fascination of this house is it's a great example of the architecture, but it's a great example of the architecture with or without that dormer, I submit.
Would you like to make a motion that?
I'll make a motion, sure. I'll make a motion that we allow this roof line change in this residence.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Joe Morgan. I second that.
Okay. Okay, let's see where we stand on this with voting. So Ron, you're at the top of my list here. I assume you're obviously a yes. I guess I shouldn't
Yes.
assume anything.
Yes.
Okay. Patricia?
I have to say no.
Okay. Christopher Fay?
Can you come back to me?
Okay. All right, Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Peter?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Let's see. I think that leaves me. I'm going to vote yes on this. So that circles back to Mr. Fay.
I will ceremonially vote no.
Okay. All right. So let's see. That was 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I think we have 4 yeses. Let's see. Ron. This was a no. Joe was yes. Peter was yes. No. Okay. So we do have 4 yeses. So, and 2 nays. That's how, I'm sure Gretchen will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I counted. So that motion passes. So what that means, Scott, I'm sure you know what that means. You're allowed to proceed with the plans you've presented. I hope that your prediction is correct, that as people pass by, they will hardly notice it. Let's see. It might be slightly optimistic, but I think you're essentially right that it's not going to be a huge deal.
Great. Well, thank you all for your comments and thoughts on what I think is a very important building to High Street.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the second matter on the agenda. Thank you, Andy. That is Jennifer and Hunter Flynn, care of this Mead, Tolman, and Custer. I think I saw Lisa Mead here today. This is 44 High Street, another roof line change application. Ms. Mead, are you speaking on behalf of the applicant or someone else?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with me tonight is Scott Brown, who's going to take about a 30-second break, who is the architect on the project. So we are here on behalf of Jennifer and Hunter Flynn for the property at 44 High Street. This is a roof line change you suggested. There's a construction of an addition comprising 1 and 2 stories at the rear, constituting the roof line change. Neither the existing section to be demolished or the proposed new section will be visible from High Street. Due to the tree coverage, landscaping, and residence on the back, it's also minimally visible from Bromfield Street. So this structure was constructed in around 1850 to 1880, depending on which data you look at. There is no Form B. The portion of the 1-story structure that we're going to show you in a minute, section, actually, there's 2 portions to it. There's a newer portion constructed after 2001. And then there's the original portion, which was at least on there as early as 1906. It appears on both the 1906 and 1914 Sanborn maps. Then there was an addition to that in 2001. And that's off to the right, and we're going to show you that. It doesn't appear on a recorded plan from 95, so it was built in around 2001 according to the building permit files. So we propose to demolish both of these parts of the 1-story addition. Andy, if you could just move forward a second to the next slide. So this is the 1906 Assess Sanborn Map, and we've highlighted down in the corner, you can see Bromfield Street. This you're going to know this house, I'm sure you all do. It's the second one in from Bromfield Street. So there it is, and you can see the little addition on the back. We think that is certainly as old as 1906 because here it is. And we don't think it was ever taken off. It was merely added onto. So if you could go to the next slide, Andy. So this is the next Sanborn map, 1914. And there you go. You can still see the addition on the back. And if you can go to the next slide, Andy. This is an assessor's map, and the house on this one is down in the corner. You can see the corner of Bromfield and High Street. And again, you see the small addition on the back. So I don't think there's any question that the addition obviously is historic as part of this. If you could blow this up a little bit, Andy. So what you can see in the back is the addition on the rear, directly in the middle, is the addition I've been showing you. And then off to the right of that is a little area that was the newer addition. And we'll show you some photos of that. The proposal is to remove both of those and enlarge it slightly in footprint. The footprint of it is only going to increase by 1.7% or just about 124 square feet. So we're going to enlarge it a little bit, and it's going to go up a story. So it's entirely in the rear of the property, smack dab practically in the middle of it. So Andy, if you can go to the next.
Before we move, quick question on this,
Sure.
please, Ms. Mead. There is like a solid outline, and there's that sort of shaded outline. So I just want to make sure I understanding this, that the part that's sort of shaded, that's the existing outline of the structure, and
Correct.
Okay, so and the black solid, more or less solid black line, I think maybe it's solid or dashed, that would be the outline of the
New.
addition. No? Oh, the new.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the new.
So on the right hand side there where the brick walk is, it would be flush with the existing
No, it
house?
actually moves in a little bit. We'll show you on an
Okay.
elevation in a
Okay.
second. It's actually
Okay.
is in, it doesn't go flush. So if you can go to the next, so this is the shot from High Street. Obviously you can't see it behind. There's a bay on the right-hand side of the house. So this is straight on across the street from Marches Hill. Andy, if you go to the next slide. This is looking south on High Street, and you're not going to be able to see it from this angle, given the location of the houses. And this is looking north on High Street. Even if we backed up a little bit, which I think I might have a shot of, but you still only see the bays. You can't see behind because of the location of the house next door. And you go to the next one. So we're going to take you down. So this is down around the right-hand side. Whoops. Okay, so now you're looking at the newer addition. So
Right.
This is the addition that was built in 2001 in the back. And if you could go to the next slide, Andy. And so you can see now you're stepping away. You see, so that large window is part of the newer addition, and the building at the right is the original addition. And go to the next one, Andy. And there's a better shot of it so you can see where it is. And one more, and there's the opposite side. And that's what we're proposing to remove, both of those additions. Right. And there it is from further back in the backyard. So if you can go to the next slide, Andy. So this is in the DCOD, and we had to do a calculation, of course, to make sure that we weren't taking more than 25% of the exterior off, which we are not. That's the calculation we provided to Jennifer. And if you go to the next one. I'm going to turn this over to Scott, and so he can show you, if we could blow up that top picture a little bit, he can show you exactly what is being added.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa. Can we unmute Matt Langus from my office if he's not already unmuted?
It looks like he's been unmuted.
Matt, are you there?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Well, Matt will do the majority of the talking here since he did the majority of the work on this project.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Langus, 38 Madison Street, Amesbury, Mass. From Scott Brown Architects. So as Lisa had mentioned, this house was built mid to late 1800s. So that comes with certain design challenges. Originally, we started out with a design that used the existing foundation and added a second floor above. But after some more investigation, we found that the existing foundation was in pretty poor shape. And in addition to that, there was virtually no access to the plumbing and utilities that were underneath the existing floor. So given that information, we decided it would be a good opportunity to tear down the addition and rebuild. We slightly expanded the footprint, as Lisa had mentioned, which allowed for better functionality of the spaces on the interior, but we're also matching the existing character of the house with the new addition by using the same materials, trim, gutters, and siding, etc. The backyard is barely visible from the sidewalk, and we consider the addition to have a very small impact to any of the existing views. So I'd be happy to discuss or answer any questions that come up about the project. If there are none, I would turn it back over to Lisa to finish up the presentation.
So I want to correct myself, Mr. Chair. As you can see, the revised addition on the one-story level of it does come out to that corner board in the back, but not beyond the base. I should have been clear about that.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it was hard to maybe tell from the plan, but so that for one story it's flush, and then the two-story part is set in. And did you have anything you wanted to add, Lisa, or should we?
So, as the chair had mentioned earlier in the prior, we would obviously like the determination that you need to make relative to the historic significance and whether it should be preferably preserved. And then once you do that, we'd request that you release this to allow the plan to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mead. I just have one real quick question. I noticed the windows in the middle on the new addition are significantly shorter in height. I assume that's probably driven by interior use of some sort.
That's correct. A mudroom, again, Matt Langis, a mudroom on the first floor and a bathroom on the second.
Yeah, okay, I figured as much. Okay, but okay. Questions from my peers here on the panel? Anyone have a question or comment, or? There are first, and so just to be, we'll make sure we're perfectly clear this time. So the first decision is to whether it is historically significant, and it's kind of, is it historically significant and preferably preserved, or is it either not historically significant or historically significant but not preferably preserved? So Mr. Fay, I see a hand.
Yes, I think it is historically significant and preferably preserved. I don't think there's any question about that. So I would make that motion right off the bat.
Okay. Was that Ron?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Seconded by Ron. Any comments before we go through the roll? Not seeing or hearing any. Okay, Ron, I see your mic is still open. Your vote, I assume, would be
Yes.
okay. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Okay. Joe Morgan.
Yes, historically significant and preferably preserved. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, and the chair, yes. So I gave everybody 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 6, and that's how many we have tonight. So it is historically significant and preferably preserved. We move on to the discussion and public hearing. We shan't forget this time for the demolition plan review. You've done some of that already, Attorney Mead. Was there anything you feel you want to add for that portion of the hearing?
No, thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Okay. Then why don't we open it to the, formally open the public comment period. If you are in the public audience and would like to speak, please use the raise hand function to allow yourself to be recognized, and they'll give people a few seconds to try to do that. While they're doing that, I'll make a couple of notes here. Let's see, did anyone raise a hand? I'm not seeing any hands this time around. Going once, going twice. Okay, sold. Okay, so Ron, I see a hand up from you. Is that for a comment?
No, I thought I was, no, sorry.
It's okay. So any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners on the whether or not the proposed plans would have should be allowed, or would they have an adverse impact and be denied? I'll have to get a recording of crickets to play during those silences. Nobody has an opinion on that? If not, I can take a motion. And then you'll have to have an opinion. Would anyone like to make a motion either way?
This is Joe Morgan. I so move that the plans be approved as presented.
Okay, motion to approve the plan. Okay, 1 second, just making note here, Joe, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that sounded like Mr. Ziemba. Right, is that you, Ron,
Yep.
seconding? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go around the horn once again. Since you're right on top there, Ron, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. McNamee?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fay?
I will vote yes.
Okay, Ms. Picnic?
Yes.
Okay, and chair votes yes. Well, that was a little bit more expeditious than the last item. So Attorney Mead will report back to the planning office that on those motions and decisions so that it'll be released for demolition permit and so on per the plans you've submitted.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
You're quite welcome. Okay, let me take a little sip of the ice has completely melted in my iced coffee, I'm afraid. Okay, let's see if we can wrap this up. We have one more item on the agenda. It's an important one. And I'm going to do a little bit of a review of this, particularly for the benefit of the newer members. A couple of you have been around since the beginning of this. So the item of the discussion is the preservation restriction for the 14 Titcomb Street, which happens to be the Central Congregational Church. And I believe, let's see if I look at the attendee list, I believe they are here. Let's see, James Robinson is here and Stuart Johnson is here. So I know they're with the church. I don't see Amantha, but she may be on the telephone. Okay, so let me get, what I would like to do is just give a brief chronology for those who haven't been here for the whole time. And so you understand a little bit what the background of this whole thing is, because this goes back to the January of 2017. I will try to be brief because it is getting late. I was not there. This is before I was even on the commission, but on 11 January 2017, Amantha Moore, I believe she is the moderator of the church, explained, was at the commission, in respect with Community Preservation Act funds. They were doing restoration of the steeple and so on. And I believe at that point, they were looking at for the sort of an endorsement of that project. And there was a motion to do so, which was approved. This goes way back to that. So this is one of those cases where, and you may be familiar with other cases similar, where the Community Preservation Act or the Community Preservation Committee is willing to disperse funds for something that's not owned, or a structure or resource that's not owned by the city, but so therefore it's not, quote, public, but is willing to provide a public benefit, which in this case is a preservation restriction, so that that asset, in this case the church building, is preserved for posterity as a cultural asset of the city. The Cushing House Museum is another similar example, and the Customs House is an example. They're all kind of have a situation similar to this. Okay, let's move up to January of 2019. I was very new to the board, I believe, at that point. But at any rate, Mr. James Robinson, or call him Jim, I think he goes by Jim Robinson, appeared, and there was a discussion of replacing windows on the first and second floor of the newer addition to the church. I should explain that there's the older part of the church. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it's mid 19th century. Then the newer part is about 1910, give or take. Kind of built on the back with classrooms and offices and that sort of thing. You know, kitchen, all that stuff that goes on. And they were looking to replace these windows. There was some discussion of the fact that there was a preservation restriction that was, at that point, had not been approved or finalized, but was in the works. So it was brought up the fact that, well, with a preservation restriction, you wouldn't be replacing windows, you'd be preserving them. And there was, in fact, there was a motion, which in fact I seconded, was by Ned McGrath at the time, to have them, let's see, a motion to have them collaborate with the Preservation Trust, to have them explore alternatives to allow them to be restored. However, that motion did not pass. There was another motion that they would work with the trust to determine if the existing windows could be restored in a reasonable way. I believe the word used was, it says if the restoration does not prove to be feasible, they could consider replacing them, and that motion was approved. And I believe it was at that meeting I asked about the preservation restriction implications of that, and it was explained that that portion of the building was not included in the preservation restriction and only applied to the front of the building, which at that time in history, 2019, was correct. The original PR, for short, please let me call it that because it's too many syllables, was written to cover just the front, you know, sanctuary part of the building, older part. A week or two later, in January 16, they appeared to the planning board. The planning board did not like the idea of replacing the windows, and they passed a motion to require restoration of all the windows, which again would have been consistent with the usual type of preservation restriction. Move ahead to January 23rd, 2019, and Ms. Moore was before this commission again, and the minutes say, you know, the map, apparently it had been sent to Mass Historical Commission, but they had not approved it yet. But would we, the Newburyport Historical Commission, approve the preservation restriction? And that motion was approved. So at that point, this commission voted to approve that preservation restriction as written. In March of that year, since the planning board had denied the permit, it was argued by Attorney Mead, who you heard from earlier, who was representing the church at the time, that as a religious institution, they were not, they could be exempt from zoning regulations and therefore did not require a special permit. So I assume, so that's how that particular thing ended as far as the special permit. I believe that died there. And at some point, dates unknown to me, some of those windows began to be replaced. On May 3rd of 2019, several months later, Mass finally replied to the preservation restriction with a letter, which I actually have here, that I've gone through. It's in some detail. It's 4 pages long with a total of 37 points that needed to be corrected. The two most significant, one, that the details defining the property did not seem to agree with what the actual property to be preserved was. And the second very major issue was that the preservation restriction had to include the entire building. They would not accept a PR that was for part of a building. So it had to be rewritten with that correction and a number of other corrections. All the ones I went through pretty much have been made. There was an error which I believe still exists in the current PR, which I'll get to in a minute, but it looks like it was actually copied from their verbiage, so it might not have been the fault of either Central Church or their attorney that got in there. And there was, but it looks like pretty much all those corrections were made, except for that one we'll get to. Okay, move ahead to June of 2019. I sent a letter to basically to the planning board saying that we had received that letter from Mass Historic and agree with, in light of everything, agree with their finding that it should cover the whole building. And it's summed up by saying, we look forward to reviewing an amended preservation restriction from the Central Congregational Church, which rectifies this and any other errors. So at that point, I have a couple of gaps in my chronology. To the best of my knowledge, I know I never saw any amended thing for us to review. Apparently one was sent back to Mass Historical. I don't know when, but was, because they have sent back a letter on May 7th of this year, 2020, a letter of, quote, conditional approval with 7 additional corrections, most of them pretty minor. So that's the chronology of the history of this thing. Andy, I think you have the current preservation restriction, right? And remember, we highlighted that section that I found that where we had those 2 things of concern. One was found
Yes.
by a member of the public. Okay, but I just be ready with that. Now that I've given some of the background, I would like to give the representatives from the church a chance to speak. Who would like to speak on behalf of the church to kind of, present on this? It sounds like Amantha, is that you? Are you?
Yes, I'm on the phone. I wasn't able to get into the picture story. So
okay, well,
yeah,
then we're not
available
video
on the
anyway.
phone.
We can hear you loud and clear, so go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. So good evening. Central Church would like to inform you that we plan to revert to the standard wording for our historic preservation restriction agreement. We will resubmit the agreement to the Mass Historical Commission for approval and get it back to Newburyport Historical Commission as soon as possible, as soon as they are able to process it. And we respectfully request a continuance.
Okay. Okay, are you referring to that, was it 6B or something like that? The reserved rights section? Is that when you say go back to the standard verbiage?
Yes, there were
Okay.
There was an addition, I think it was on page 6 of the
Yes.
document.
That's right.
Yes, and it was item number 6 that is on page 6.
Okay. Okay, so you plan to remove that sentence?
We do.
Okay. You may not know about this, Andy. I think it was up under number 4. There was a minor error, and I don't think it's your fault, Samantha. There was, I think, in the verbiage that you were sent from us had this error in it. If you see it on the screen, well, you're not in the meeting, but I know I see Jim and Stu Johnson are there. It's on page 5, number 4, down the bottom, prohibited activities. It says, section D as in dog of that, no additions and or outbuildings may be attached to the building or erected on the property without prior approval of the grantor, with the except. Now that must be a mistake because you are the grantor. I believe it's supposed to be grantee, which would be the commission. You see what I'm saying? And yeah, so just make a note of that. Again, I'm sure it was just a minor oversight. Bottom of page 5, 4D. Now, Jim Robinson, I see you're in attendance, and Mr. Johnson, if you want to say anything, you're able to. That's up to you. You don't have to, but if you would like to, you may. Okay. Oh, I see a hand from Mr. Johnson. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, Mantha and Jim and I and others in the church spoke about this afternoon, and we're all in agreement. Mantha stated our position, and we've asked for a continuance so we can correct the document.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then I think to keep things short and sweet, so to speak, why don't I go ahead and make a motion to allow the Central Church to continue this. Did you have a specific date, or do you not know how much time you need?
Oh, I think from our end, the correction can be made quickly, but we can't predict how long it might be in the hands of the Mass Commission.
Oh, I see. So you want to come back when they have approved it?
Yes, and when they have approved it, again, they will, again, copy, I believe they copied Andy, Caitlin, and Glenn. Is that,
Okay.
And we received the
Okay.
response. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well then, yeah.
Sorry, Chair Richards, this is Andy Port.
Yep.
Might I suggest, rather than continuance to a specific date, that if Amanda wants to, or the applicant wants to let the office know through Caitlin Sullivan or myself what date when they've heard back from MHC or we get a communication back, we could just place it on the next available NHC agenda.
Yeah.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that, Andy. Okay. Yeah. That'll work. So the motion then is to continue this without prejudice to not a specific date, but a date to be determined once the requirements are met. Obviously we can't really discuss it till we have that restriction that's back. Is there a second for that particular motion?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Any discussion before I take a vote on that? Anyone have a question or? Don't see any hands there. Okay, we'll go around the horn. Ron, you're at the top again. Your vote on this motion to continue?
Yes.
Okay. Christopher Fay?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Patricia?
Yes.
Who am I sorry? Ron, Mr. Ziemba.
Already voted.
Oh, you're ready. Yes, I see you there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, the only one missing is me, the chair. The chair votes yes. All right, so we're unanimous. Okay, Martha, thank you for dialing in. Sorry you had trouble with the other part, but you're not missing much. And thank you for your cooperation on this. And I'm glad we were able to obviously it's not the end of the story, but at least it'll let us to end the meeting without going too late tonight. So it's always appreciated. So we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Okay, we do have 1 or 2 other items. There is the approval of the minutes from the 25th of June. Does anyone dare make a motion for approval of those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, that what sounded like Mr. Morgan, is that right? Or
No, it's McNamee.
oh, McNamee. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so I've seen this done in Zoom meetings where everyone's mic is on and they all say either yes or no, but maybe we'll continue for now. It's a small group. We'll continue the roll call. So it's okay. So Ron?
Yes.
Okay, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, Peter?
Yes.
Patricia?
Yes.
And chair is yes. Okay, so those are approved. Does anyone have any other business that's not on the agenda that, well, that we probably wouldn't be able to talk about anyway, perhaps, other than adjournment? That would be the next item.
Glenn, I just have a question.
Yes.
And it comes about because we have the sort of argument made that, let's say there's an addition on the back of a house or a dormer that's not visible from the street.
Right.
And I'm just curious about whether or not, to me, it strikes me as, well, 1, subjective, and 2, is that something that we are supposed to take into account? Because I think about in terms of, if we determine a house as historically significant, but everything's going to go into the backyard, does that open up carte blanche for people to do whatever they want in the back of their house? And I know Malcolm's not with us, but Malcolm, to paraphrase Malcolm, who's said many times, that sort of stuff belongs in North Andover. Not to pick on North Andover, but you want a house with what I call a deck that goes down to a porch, that goes down to a stone patio, that goes to a deck. I'm not sure that belongs here. So I don't know if it's worth bringing up right now. I don't want to delay things because we are done early, but maybe just something to think about, because I hear this and it confuses me.
Yeah. Well, I can give you actually a quick answer, and Planning Director Port may be able to chip in as well, but I believe the ordinance doesn't specifically say anything about whether things are visible from a public way in this, in our particular case. So, however, I know for me personally, I do take it into consideration. In these two cases, I think in the 44 High Street one, it clearly wasn't going to be visible from the street. The other one, that was a little bit more arguable, but it's one of the things that is considered, but it's not. And Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it says anything specifically in the law about whether it's visible from a public way in this, in terms of what the way I understand it is we're trying to determine in a historic structure, is it going to have an adverse impact on the historical value? Is it going to destroy historical features and so on? So for example, let's say that even an addition on the back, if they had to demolish historically significant features of the house to do it, that would be a problem. In this case, that's why I believe Attorney Mead made a point of pointing out that what they were demolishing was much newer construction that wasn't really part of the whole historic fabric of the main building. See what I'm saying? So they weren't, so that addressed that issue of are they destroying historic fabric?
Yeah, sorry, I agree with you, Chair Richards, that you're not limited by whether it's visible from a public way.
Yeah. Does that help answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, when I said earlier, like the house will know, I always sort of
Right.
think about that, we've talked about and looked at houses that might be 150, 200 years old, that for that enormous amount of time, the house was fine the way that it was. And when we've arrived here in the 21st century, and some of you have heard me say this before, but all of a sudden people have this need for 5 additional rooms. And I think for me, it's always something so it confuses me because I look at this as the house is historically significant, not whether or not the addition will have a negative impact on the neighbors or people that happen to be walking by. Because again, it's subjective. If I happen to look up and see something on High Street, then I might scratch my head. And we all can walk around the city again and see things as I did today again and scratch our heads and go, how did that possibly happen?
Yeah.
Even though it's in the back of the house, I saw something today. You have to come at it at a certain angle, but it definitely detracts from the house. It's a roof deck. And I don't know if it's something that maybe, I know we're sort of evolving here, I think, a little bit, that we continue to maybe think about, because I know that it's come up in terms of it has an adverse effect on what people can see, but the converse isn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't have an adverse impact on the house. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a good point, Chris. And I should mention this. It's not an item for discussion or anything, but just a FYI. Andy has agreed to talk to us about kind of go through a preservation restriction, what they consist of, so we all have a better understanding of what a preservation restriction is and how it's done. I know, Joe, this is going to be important for you in particular if you're going to be working with the folks at the library and so forth. And thank you very much for volunteering to do that. So Andy, I think we've kind of tentatively said we'll try to do that at our next meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to unmute. Yes, that's what we've agreed. Unless there's, for any reason, anything else gets added to the agenda, I assume we'll discuss it at the end of the meeting and go over that in greater detail.
Yeah. All right. So I'll, so try to attend that. That should be a helpful discussion on helping us all understand preservation restrictions.
Can I say something? Before you make a motion to adjourn, can I just say I really appreciate what Christopher Fay said and agree with him. And the phrase viewable from a public way is all throughout the Secretary's standards. And the standards say, please don't do this and please don't do that. And if you have to, well, gosh darn it, I guess please put it so that it's not viewable from a public way. It doesn't say, as long as one can see it, game on, do whatever you want. That language is in there to sort of encourage homeowners to say, if it's absolutely necessary, then can we please not see it? But again, it doesn't invite people to do things. And we noticed that Attorney Mead on 44 High Street was careful in the application materials to say, this will not be visible from Bromfield Street, right? She took pains to point that out because she's recognizing that aspect of the standards. So I just thought I would add that, and I appreciate what Chris said.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's I'm very happy that, you know, so many of you, you know, that you all are taking our task here seriously. You know, I know we've all, speaking for myself, and I know certainly you, Patricia, and I know others are really looking into not just our local ordinances here, but the Secretary's standards, and really, you know, really giving this some serious thought. And I think it's all to the good, especially for, you know, we're just volunteers here. So, you know, it's work to be commended. So thank you all for your time and efforts. So speaking of time, yeah.
Can I finish on one note? Just to pick up on that, and I'll just read one sentence. It's a city, so everything is pretty much visible from a perspective if you just walk in a certain direction and turn your head a certain way. So, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Now, I don't suppose anyone would dare to make a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion. Chris will make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and Chair seconds it. Chris, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, Ron Ziemba?
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan?
Yes, thank you.
Patricia Pecknick?
Yes.
Patrick McNee?
Yes.
And the chair is yes. So we can officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Andy Port, for running the show for us. And with that, we close the meeting. Thank you all for your attention.
Happy birthday, Glenn!
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Glenn.
Maybe I'll put something in my coffee. All right, thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.